Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Monday's edition. We're still traveling, folks, as we will be for the next couple months. Right now, we're in Delray Beach, Florida, broadcasting from sunny Florida, where it's 78 degrees. Happy to have you with us today. And I don't know how many of you caught the drama about the McCarthy speakership, but it's old news now. But boy, I got to tell you, Republicans and McCarthy better get to work now, because, 15 ballots into this, and as we talked last week, this was not a good look on a way to become speaker. Now, like most issues, this will fade from memory over a period of time, especially if they start getting results. But boy, I got to tell you something. I editorialized on this last week. That was a very ugly process. It did the Republican Party very little good, in my opinion. Now, at the end of the day, with some of the rule changes that are being in place, the members seem comfortable with it. And maybe we're going to have a situation where, like they say about passing bills, it was ugly how they make the sausage, but at the end of the day, maybe the party will come out stronger. That is still to be determined. But McCarthy has been elected Speaker of the House. It came on the 15th ballot. The 14th ballot was very acrimonious. They thought they had it done on that. And, Matt Gaetz had voted present instead of voting for McCarthy. But Gaetz is a grandstander, always has been, always will be. Ultra conservative guy. Again, Lauren Boebert, same camp. I was a pretty big supporter of hers, pretty lukewarm on her right now based upon the fiasco she pulled in these votes. But at the end of the day, both Gaetz and Boebert were able to set aside differences, and McCarthy was able to win the speakership. Now, the next step in the party and in the House of Representatives is voting on the rules. In other words, McCarthy made lots of promises to changes in the rules, and that's how he was able to secure some of those votes. So what they're going to be doing today, tomorrow, is taking the next steps on codifying what these rules are that they're going to vote on. Pelosi ran sort of an ironclad ship where basically it was her way or the highway, and whatever she said went. That was one of the big issues that those 20 Republican House members who opposed McCarthy, where they were going to put up with no part of that. And according to multiple people, both moderates and conservatives, some semblance of getting members involved in drafting and voting on bills is basically going to be written into these rules. So I'm sort of taking a let's see approach. I know it was ugly. It was acrimonious. It did not put a good face on the party. But I also know this. It's over. We'll move on. No one's going to be talking about this, later in the year. I mean, it is not. That's just the way politics works. Probably once they get into legislature, people won't talk about it. So, we'll give Kevin McCarthy the respect he's due. It was tough, but the guy's a fighter, and he withstood 14 negative rounds before on the 15th round they finally approved it. In history, this will go down as, a partisan fight, a Republican fight. But at the end of the day, he is the speaker, and we have to move forward. So, again, they're going to be codifying rules on voting. That's the next thing that you'll hear us talking about. Now, over the weekend, doesn't it shock you? I mean, for those of you who watch and listen to Schaftlein Report, we've been talking about the border issue almost from the day Biden, took office. And finally, 2 years in, the president visits the border in El Paso over the weekend. I mean, folks, talk about a little too little too late. He didn't even have the decency to invite the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, who was forced to pen a letter to Biden about what was happening. I mean, most of the time when Biden goes to a state, even with Republican governors, the governor meets with the president. Biden was such low class and his handlers didn't do that on this case. Why? because they're in absolute disagreement about how this border thing's being handled. Democrats and their soft hearts, they want to let everybody in the country. Every migrant in the world should be able to come to the United States. That's the way Democrats think. The rest of us want to have a border and have a process. Well, you know, Abbott's been doing everything he could to protect that border. He's got the Texas National Guard there. They've been shipping migrants by the thousands to these sanctuary cities, so much so that the sanctuary cities are getting overburdened. My guess is that Biden finally went to the border because he'd heard an earful from Democratic mayors across the country saying, you've got to do something about this. Now, the far left-wing radicals in his administration, this is catnip for them. They don't want to do anything. They want an open border, which is basically what we have right now, folks. So don't think anything's going to come. They're going to use the same old thing. They're going to say, well, you know what he's doing? He's blaming Republicans. Now, wait a minute. Up until a couple days ago, you know, Democrats had the White House, they had the Senate, and they had the House. They could have done anything they wanted on the border, but they didn't. Why? Because they wanted to flood this country with illegal immigrants and then try to pressure Republicans into doing some type of amnesty. That's not going to happen. Republicans will never go for anything until that border is secure. That is an ironclad condition. They've learned their lessons in the past. There's not going to be any amnesty. There's not going to be any doctor. There's not going to be anything until they get that border secured. Otherwise, this issue is just going to continue. And again, once it gets to a point where these sanctuary city, blue city mayors, like Eric Adams, again, I could go through a laundry list of them, you know, Philadelphia, Denver, they're throwing their arms up and saying, you've got to do something. You got to supply us with money. You got to do something because we can't handle it. It's breaking our budgets. Gavin Newsom, governor of the state of California, same thing. So only at a point where it's causing pain for blue state governors, and damn near every city's a blue city mayor, is this problem going to rise to a point at the White House where they address it? And Kamala Harris, she's dumb as a rock. I mean, the vice president has done absolutely nothing to advance, you know, the border. Mayorkas, the DHS secretary, who's likely to be impeached by the Republican House, he gets on there talking about how good a job he's doing. Look, having an open border is not the answer. You know it. I know it. But do I expect anything to happen? No, I really don't. My expectations are low. Now, here in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has had to deploy the Florida National Guard as migrants from Cuba, Venezuela, they're coming into Florida, into the Keys on boats. That's right. You heard me say it. Yeah, boats. So they've had to deploy the National Guard to the Keys. There were some even came on shore here in Palm Beach County. So small numbers. I'm not talking big numbers here, folks, but it always starts with a trickle. I'm going to date myself, but I remember when in the 1980s when the Muriel boat lift happened, you know, there was tens of thousands of Cubans sought, you know, freedom in Florida, and they were all welcome because, you know, I mean, Castro emptied his jails, but a lot of the Cuban people who settled in Dade County eventually, you know, they came from Cuba in the boat lifts. So this is a different story than this stuff. I mean, we have people coming in from different countries. And so, again, Ron DeSantis has deployed the National Guard. We'll see if the problem escalates or not, but it's a small amount right now. But DeSantis isn't one to take any chances with this because you know this is going to be a political issue heading into the 2024 presidential campaign. Now, speaking of the 2024 presidential campaign, it does appear that President Biden is setting the stage to run for re-election, despite having a 42% approval rating, and despite the fact the vast majority of the Democratic Party does not want to see him run. Our guess, and we've talked about this many times, is we expect Biden to run. I mean, in his mind, he's sitting here thinking, well, we passed X bill, Y bill, Z bill. We just outperformed in the midterm election. We didn't lose a single Senate seat. I got news for you. That wasn't because of him. that had a lot to do with candidates and candidate selection. But yeah, well, I don't want to get into the election. So, but again, Biden does look like he's going to run. And right now, he only has one Republican opponent, and that's Trump. Now, we know there's others that are going to get in it. But as was discussed over the weekend in various political circles, do you want to be the first person in the ring with Trump? You know the mud's going to come. You know the arrows will come, the slinging, the insults. My guess, and we've talked about this, is I think the Republicans will have somewhere between 6 to 8 candidates who will challenge the president. We kicked about the names before. So let's see how it plays itself out. But right now, it does appear that despite the fact that Joe Biden would be 82 if elected, he does appear that he wants to run. And again, you and I have seen just the sheer incompetency at times. I mean, it's frightening to know that this man, could be a nominee on a major party ticket at his age. But that appears to be what's happening. Now, in other political news, Michigan Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow has announced her retirement. She is not going to seek a 5th term. Well, that's important because that's going to open up the state of Michigan, which is a swing state. Trump won it in 2016. Biden won it in 2020. It's very close in Michigan. So she's not going to seek re-election. So that's another Senate seat that Democrats are going to have to now defend. Now, I don't know what her reasons were behind that, but you think about it. She served 4 terms. She's been there 24 years. Well, who could blame her for wanting to step aside? So again, Stabenow announces no re-election for 5th term. Now, on the political side, you've heard us talk a little bit before about that, the Georgia situation. The Georgia grand jury has completed it. It's what I call its Trump work. They've issued a report. It's not public yet. And that grand jury's been disbanded. Now, they had no power to prosecute the former president, but they can recommend an action to another grand jury. I know it's complicated, folks. I get it. And all of this basically revolves around Trump's phone call with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who won re-election, who Trump was pressuring to try to find 11 to 12,000 votes to put him over the top. Okay, that's what this is all about. Now, a lot of Democrats suspect that, Trump's going to get indicted in Georgia. Trump's always going to get indicted constantly. But in this case, they didn't have the power to do this. Now, what will happen from here, we don't know. But I anticipate that we have not heard the last of this story. So let me now do a little bit of shift here. Economic news. The stock market's been doing pretty well the last few days. It's up again today. However, Goldman Sachs has announced that they're going to be laying off 3,200 employees. That's a big number, folks, for a firm the size of Goldman Sachs. That is a big number. We've heard about layoffs, in the technology industry, but where this is sort of where shifting now to where more in the, in the banking business. And is this a prelude to further layoffs? Possibly. In New York City over the weekend, 7,000 nurses went on strike. What are they striking about? Pay, of course, and support. Overworked and underpaid, according to the nurses. So you're going to see more about this. The economic report that came out on Friday was pretty good news, folks. Unemployment was at 3.5%, which is good. 223,000 jobs were added in the month of December. That's a good number. So all this talk about, recession, slowdown, it's not happening in the jobs market yet. Wages are continuing to rise, but at a certain point, these layoff numbers in technology, finance, it'll spread. Advertising businesses slowing down, real estate, I could name a few others. But at a certain point, it will take effect. Right now, it's not. You don't have recessions with 3.5% unemployment and adding 223,000 jobs. It just doesn't happen that way. Now, in overseas news, a couple things. First of all, massive protests across Brazil And, there are protesters attacking the equivalent of their Congress, their Supreme Court. And of course, Democrats are trying to make it out to be, well, all they did, they took a lesson from January 6th, and now they're doing the same thing. The Brazilian government has said that protesters are going to be arrested, and they are supporting the far right-wing candidacy of Bolsonaro. Look, that election's over. The U.S. government recognizes it, but you are seeing massive protests in the Brazilian capital. Also, the war continues unabated between the Ukrainians and the Russians. Every day, you're seeing reports of hundreds of soldiers being killed on both sides of the battlefield. Folks, it's going to continue. And the Ukrainians are using effective weapons given to it by NATO and the West. The Russians are throwing people at it like cannon fodder. It's in the winter over there. No political solution appears in sight. And, these battles are going to continue. And, finally, folks, shifting a little bit to the National Football League, the NFL playoff picture's firmly set. And the remarkable recovery of Damar Hamlin continues. I mean, Hamlin, as you saw, was stricken by cardiac arrest. When the Buffalo and Cincinnati played previously on Monday night, he's made a remarkable recovery. I mean, effectively, his heart stopped on the field. The time we're not really that certain. But the man effectively was almost deceased on the field. Now he's come back. He's off the breathing machine, making great progress. And the NFL certainly celebrated Damar Hamlin's recovery over the weekend, and good for him and good for the league. So, we're excited. The football playoffs will be starting this coming Saturday. And for all you NFL fans, you've got a smorgasbord of games, and it's going to be great. Tonight, the College Football National Championship, Georgia Bulldogs, the TCU Horned Frogs. We're a little partial to the Bulldogs here, being the Southeastern Conference. So should be an exciting game tonight between those two. We think Georgia will pull out a victory by a decent amount. For those who have a gambling interest on the game, the point spread's around 12, 13 points. So, look, one other programming announcement, folks, about the Schaftlein Report show. For the first quarter of 2023, I'm going to be traveling extensively. So we're going to make an adjustment to the show going forward. This week, we'll be doing the show today, and we'll have Jeffrey here on Thursday. Going forward next week, we will be doing the audio and video of the show when applicable every Tuesday and Thursday. So because I'm traveling, you're going to be getting Schaftlein Report video most of the time, but not always. Podcast audio every Tuesday and Thursday. And we'll be doing that for the next quarter while I'm here in Florida and doing travels around the state. So adjust your schedules accordingly. Schaftlein Report will be every Tuesday and every Thursday going forward starting next week. And our next show this week will be on Thursday with Jeffrey as my guest. So small adjustment for the first quarter of 2023, but we will be with you on those 2 days each week throughout the first quarter as I'm traveling. So that's sort of a summary of where we are today, folks. Hitting on the politics of the day, the economy, what's happening overseas, a little bit of sports thrown in for you. But we're looking forward to an exciting first quarter. We're very happy that Republicans are in charge of the House of Representatives. And again, to sum it up, I know it looked ugly, but at the end of the day, folks, having open debate and participation of members is more important than that top-down style that Pelosi had. And at least now we'll have a check and balance, on how the government works. So thanks for listening. Thanks for viewing today. Much appreciated. We will be back on Thursday. And as always, we will hit it straight. We'll cut through all the propaganda, and we'll give you the news as to what's really happening. Thanks for listening today. Have a good week. See you on Thursday.